Friends, yesterday we have discussed what is mean by archetypes of literature, what is mythical and archetypal criticism, and what is the role of Northrop Frye in talking about archetypal criticism. And we yesterday even discussed about how Northrop Frye is comparing and trying to bring uh, criticism as organized body of knowledge, and he mentioned that literature can be understood by the way of criticism. What is the status of criticism today when we try to understand literature, and how criticism is being treated as only to comment on certain things? Richards is trying to bring out the most important thing about criticism is that if we feel that criticism is necessary to understand literature, then he's saying that what philosophy is to wisdom and what history to action, similarly, you can have criticism to literature in understanding of literature. Moving further, Richards is pointing out that how criticism is being used, how criticism is being created. And if you see the whole essay, Fry divided this essay into three different parts, where he is pointing out about how criticism is important to understand literature. Then he is pointing out how literature is responding to criticism. And third thing, he is saying that what are those archetypes for understanding of literature. Now, while talking about how criticism is being created, as we have seen it as a science of knowledge, he's comparing with science. But what is the condition of criticism? Richards pointing out that most of the central area of criticism is at present, we'll find out, will be the area of commentary. And we also consider that this delivering a commentary on certain literary text means criticism, and this is what we always used to think, we always used to find it out. Because it is a scientific process. And if we are not following the scientific process, what the commentators used to do about when they used to comment on certain things, commentator usually comment on the things which are presented in front of them. And that's why Richards used a very harsh word that he said that commentators have very little sense. They don't have any sense, very little sense. Even he said that the commentators does not have sense like researchers, because they have not come or they have not contained with some sort of scientific discipline. They're not familiar with any sort of scientific discipline, that what sort of discipline they should follow while commenting on certain things. Look out his very harsh remarks over the critics, commentators. And those commentators are treated as critics who understand literature. What commentators used to do, they don't know the scientific discipline, that how to mention certain things, how to analyze certain things, how to talk about certain things. These commentators, according to Richards, they are involved in, or they're chiefly engaged in the words of gospel hymns. They are trying to eliminate the areas which they are familiar with. The commentators try to brighten those corners where they are comfortable. And we started to consider this whole commentary as criticism, as a thing to understand literature. Richards, being very harsh on these types of commentators, he is also pointing out that what sort of comprehensive ideas do we find in criticism? What sort of comprehensive ideas should be part of criticism? Usually what happens, that when you, if you ask anybody a question about criticism, what exactly criticism means by, nobody is ready to point out that criticism is a scientific discipline in itself. The very interesting question, that if you ask any student of literature that do you know what role criticism plays, and you will get answers, very 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 interesting and funny answers you can able to get it, because nobody is interested in understanding what exactly criticism means by. But we are answering, or if you take from 15th onwards, once the offline classes will open, you can have this interesting survey. You can see, ask any student of any literature, Hindi, Marathi, Urdu, whosoever your friends are, you ask them a very simple straight literature, what is mean by criticism, what criticism, how criticism is suitable for literature. This is no, criticism is not a, it is one of the branches of literature. We study it. Because we are not familiar with criticism, that's why we are little familiar with the sort of pleasure that we can derive from literature. Most of the time we are answerless. If somebody asks a student from science stream, and this is what usually happens when we used to be the part of students in the department, students of science used to ask us a very simple question, that what is the use of reading literature and what you will do in contributing the field of knowledge. If you are familiar with the fact that literature is depending completely on criticism, and criticism is used to make you to understand literature, which is part of humanities, which makes you to understand how You have to behave in the social framework and how to live life. Science will make life comfortable, but how to live this comfortable life, you have to learn it from humanity's perception. And that's why criticism plays a very crucial role into it. What we find ourselves that there are some wandering boys who are making general statements about certain things. We are trying to understand the comprehensive idea of criticism, and then we find it that those comprehensive ideas which we are trying to find out, those are giving certain judicious pronouncements of values. Those ideas are giving reflective comments. Those are dealing with preparation to work of research, and in large view, other consequences. What are the other consequences that can take place there? We understand literature only in that way. What exactly criticism is? We understand criticism in this way that there are the critics to whom he called as wandering, quacking, or wandering uh, boys, quacking bogs, he used to call them. They used to wander everywhere, and they used to give certain general statements, generalities, and they are simply giving a judicial pronouncements over of value. They reflect their comments, reflective comments, prorogation to the work of research, other consequences that are taking the large view. These are the things usually treated as criticism. Fry, very aggressive on these types of critics who used to call themselves contributing in criticism. He says that this part of critical field is full of pseudo propositions. Nowadays, pseudo word is very familiar to most of us, in India especially. Pseudo propositions. In the field of criticism, there are pseudo propositions. There are sonorous nonsense that contains no truth and no falsehood. Both the things are not there. Now, this obviously exists only because we call it as a criticism. This is what Fry very boldly rejecting all these understandings of criticism that we have. These things are, he saying, pseudo propositions that you are finding out in criticism. You are finding out sonorous nonsense that contains no truth and no falsehood. Both the things are not there. because it is what Fry is saying. It is nature's phenomenon that nature prefers a vast space to an empty one. Please remember this. This is a very interesting thing. The students who are having little bit of science background, because I know most of the students are coming from science background to this course. At least some of us, like me, who have completed their 12th from science and then shifting towards arts, knowing that we should change something, we should do something different. So we have a little bit of science, we can understand it. Or even we read till our school days. That is very interesting. There are laws of thermodynamics, and the laws of thermodynamics used to say that no energy can be destroyed, nor energy can be converted, nor energy can be destroyed, and nor energy can be created. In the same fashion, nature is not having any empty space with it. Empty space is also full with waste one. This is the phenomenon of nature. You will not find any empty space. Empty space is having a full of waste things kept there. Similarly, if we don't have any scientific understanding and scientific disciplined understanding of criticism, then naturally this waste thing will be the part of our understanding. Friends, give me a minute. I'll rejoin it because I have an important call from the university. Please wait for a moment. So we are using this space with such type of pseudo propositions. And if you say anything that is available with you, that's why yesterday I said to you that yes, we have very annoying picture with us that we used to accept the cheap notes as critical notes. Fry is very particular about it. Further in this discussion about pseudo proposition, he pointed out that the term pseudo proposition may imply some positivist attitude on understanding criticism on Fry's part. That's why he's saying I use the word called pseudo proposition. May have objections for that from some scholar, that how do you call commentary as a pseudo proposition? Because commentators somehow are giving some sort of judicious pronouncements of value. And he said that they are sonorous nonsense that contain no truth and no falsehood. If you see that, Fry is pointing out about this pseudo proposition Fry is talking about this pseudo understanding of criticism. He says, I am having certain positivist attitude, and certain logical positivist. What is logical? We know it from two uses of language. Fry, continuing this argument of pseudo proposition, which he uses very pertinently in commenting on the criticism that is available around us. He said that he would not confuse the significant proposition with the factual one. Nor he said that he should consider it advisable to muddle the study of literature with certain schizophrenic dichotomy between subjective emotional and objective descriptive aspect of meanings, which considering that in order to produce any literary meaning, we have to ignore this dichotomy, because this is what made us to understand literature. We have not ignored that dichotomy. What is subjective is emotional and what is objective is descriptive. That is what we got it. Aspects of meaning. Subjective aspects of meanings are emotional meanings, and descriptive meanings are the objectives. And that's why Fry is saying that we should not confuse with significant propositions like this with factual study, with factual one. Now, when we are talking about all those things, and please note this word which is very, very, you can say, word which is used for illness in psychology, schizophrenic. That a person of schizophrenia always used to feel that he is having some other person with him. Some person is there, and that's why he's talking alone, feeling that someone is sitting beside him. He's talking to that particular person. Always feeling that something is there. And this is schizophrenic. This is what we are always carrying with us, that these things are already there. The schizophrenic patient used to find out that someone to whom he is talking is there, when actually that is not, the person is not beside him or not with him. That's a schizophrenic person used to speak continuously, and you think that why he's talking to himself. No, he's not talking to himself. He's always thinking that someone is beside him, someone is sitting beside him, someone is listening him to, someone is talking him, he's in front of him. We are also having this schizophrenia in our mind when we try to understand, when we try to carry out, when we try to derive certain meaning, aspects of meanings from literature. And we have this schizophrenia that subjective is emotional, objective, descriptive. These are the dichotomy. If you want to produce any literary meaning out of the literary text, Richards is claiming that we need to avoid this dichotomy. Not only avoid, he said we should ignore the dichotomy. Then and then it is possible for us to have a sort of understanding about literature, then criticism can able to work to make you to know what exactly literature. Similarly, as physics used to understand nature, similarly criticism will help us to understand the literature. And that's why what he claimed in the earlier part of this essay, that no student of physics will say that I am studying nature. He says I am studying physics. That means when you say I am studying literature, you have to mention it very clearly that no, I am studying criticism, so that I can able to understand literature, because criticism can be understood with the help of literature only. And this is what a common area that Fry is not interested in accepting, that saying that we are not following this in a logical positivist attitude. He says that when you are trying to derive certain literary meaning, that the principle by which one can distinguish a significant part of meaning or statement, if somebody is trying to understand the literary meaning with one particular principle, that we should have certain meanings out of it, criticism will not accept meaningless statement. And meaningless statement, which are meaningful statements, which are meaningless statement, those things are not clearly defined in criticism. Building up what would be the archetypes we can able to find out is building up the argument. And building up the argument with the statement that criticism does not have any significant form. To derive meaningless statement in criticism, do you have any significant form to derive that these are the meaningless statements in criticism? What are the meaningless statement in criticism? These are not clearly defined. What are meaningful statements? What are meaningless statements? These statements are not clearly defined. And therefore, Fry says our first step is to recognize and get rid of meaningless criticism. Our first step is to recognize and get rid of meaningless criticism. Naturally, when you are talking about once you get rid of meaningless criticism, what will remain? Because what he said, nature never keep the space empty. When you get rid of meaningless statement, what remains is meaningful criticism. And he's claiming that once you get rid of meaningless criticism, that is talking about literature in a way that cannot build up a systematic structure of knowledge, that we have to get rid of. You may say, sir, what is mean by meaningless statement? Fry makes it very clear to you what is mean by meaningless statements. Meaningless statements, meaningless criticism, that is talking about literature in a way that cannot help to build up a systematic structure of knowledge. That is meaningless criticism. Casual value judgments. They are giving value judgments very casually. He says that these casual value judgment belong not to criticism. These casual value judgments are not belong to criticism, but to the history of test. You'll find out most of the time when you, I think, when you read certain reviews of films that used to come in newspapers, to make it sensational, you give certain judgments, value judgments, casual judgments. Casual judgments. The projection of protagonist in this particular drama is not good. This is a very casual value judgment. Is it building a systematic structure of knowledge? It will make your test that, okay, yes, is good and bad. This is the test, common understanding of a test, whether good or bad. So casual value judgments are not having any place in criticism, but they are related with the history of test. And when they are related with history of test and reflect at best only the social and psychological compulsions which prompted their utterances. There are certain social and psychological you can say compulsions. These compulsions, social and psychological compulsions, that I'll give a very simple example of a character that we used to have. If you see the literature produced during Elizabethan period, Shakespeare, Marlowe, like this, these people have produced the major chunk of literature during Elizabethan period. Or Milton, who comes in Jacobean, but some part of him appears in at the fag end of Elizabeth. The projection of Jew, the people from Jew community, how they are. Read the play written by Christopher Marlowe, Jew of Malta, or if you want, you can read a play by Shakespeare, or you can find out the character in The Merchant of Venice in Shakespeare. You will find out that when critics used to write about Jews, they are having a very common social and psychological compulsions over them, that Jews are villainous people. They start to blame that person, and not only they blame the person, but they blame the whole community because of it. Look out how the characterization, Jew of Malta, or even if Shakespeare's very famous Shylock. Look out Shylock. How Shylock is. How Shylock is doing. Shylock is such type of cunning person that he is calling or he is taking the part of flesh instead of money. So there are social and psychological compulsions. And the critics used to comment on the meaning of that literature through the social and psychological compulsions. And these social and psychological compulsions prompted them to give certain casual value judgments. And all the judgments, as I said you, social and psychological compulsions, all the judgments in which values are not based on literary experience, but those judgments are sentimental, or you can say derived from religious or political prejudice. These things may be regarded as casual. What is meant by casual value? You may have a question. What is casual value judgment? So casual things, as I said you by giving example of the projection of Jew in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice or Marlowe's Jew of Malta. Similarly, you are giving a very casual judgments nowadays. Look at the whole scenario in Indian political and social framework right now today. Casual value judgments. Everybody is giving casual value judgment. Projection of one community as the most brutal community. They believe only in violence. So when you are trying to give values, deliver judgment on values which are not having any sort of literary experience. Now you may have a question that, sir, what is meant by the literary experience? Knowing that how to project a character in one particular form. What are to be called as the negative shade of character. Why this character is presented in a negative shade? There are certain sorts of reasons and causes for him to become a villain in that particular case. Again, take an example of Shakespeare's Iago, which we discussed in last essay also. By taking Reimer's position, that Iago is a villain. But why he behaved in such a villainous way, we need to understand the experience, literary experience, that how this person has been created. Instead of giving any sentimental value, sentimental uh, responses to it, which is, and that's why this essay is most contemporary to us to understand in today's, apart from our literary understanding, apart from our curriculum, apart from our examination point of view, this is most important to understand how we are passing on casual value judgments. So Fry is very categorically mentioning that without, the values are not based on literary experiences but based on sentimental, certain sentiments. Tweets nowadays. Sentiments are derived from certain religious or political prejudice. These things may be recorded as casual. Fry furthermore pointing out that sentimental judgments are usually based either on non-existent categories or antithesis. Non-existent categories or on a visceral reaction to the writer's personality. Because certain antithesis is in our mind. Antithesis like Shakespeare studied Milton. Shakespeare studied life, Milton's books. These are the common antithesis that we used to follow. Shakespeare studied life, and that's why he can able to produce a characters like Hamlet, blah 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 blah. We used to write like that. We used to comment in that fashion. These sorts of things. Milton's books, based on his experience, his idea to promote Christianity into the world. This is what usually we have in our mind. From Indian context, Indian perception, we forgot Ramayana and Mahabharata are one of the best epics that India ever produced. We gave them status of religious books. We have certain sentiments. And that's why what happens once you are having a sentimental judgment about any literary text, then you are not able to build up any argument based on literary ideas which can add something to the area of knowledge, which can made part of area of knowledge. And that's why when you pursue any sort of research, the question comes there how it will expand the area or subject of knowledge, how it will contribute in the area of knowledge, and we don't know how it is going to contribute it in the area of knowledge. Our common understanding contributing to the area of knowledge that he is giving certain new terms or coining certain new terms means he is contributing, and that's why most of the people used to say that okay, uh, people from science can able to contribute because they are doing some practical works into their labs, and that's why they are able to contribute something, and we the students of literature only having these genres with us, how can we contribute? Yes, we can contribute in clearing the perceptions of the people, because most of the time we used to create sentimental judgments, and that's why Fry is very categorically mentioning that either we used to follow certain non-existent categories which are not at all part of the literary work, a certain antithesis, or we have a viscera of the writer's personality with us, and we start to apply a writer's biography to his literary work of art and say that because of this literary biography he has done this particular thing. This is what writer's personality is, and that's why he has projected this particular thing. Without understanding, without knowing, knowing what exactly it means, and that's why Fry is trying to clarify these things, that what is mean by sentimental judgment. He first of all clarify you that what is mean by uh, judgments, value judgments. Please understand how he is analyzing the things step by step to you. He first cleared you what is mean by pseudo propositions, then pointing out that pseudo propositions, you say that which are, you need not to confuse that the significant propositions with factual one. And he even say that study of literature is always muddled with the schizophrenic dichotomy between sentimental, subjective emotional, and objective descriptive. And then he is saying that uh, the principles which one can distinguish the significant form of meaningless expression, meaningless statement in criticisms are clearly not defined. That's why he's trying to make it everything clear step by step to us, saying that casual value judgments are not part of criticism. They does not belong to criticism, but these critical casual value judgments do not belong to any criticism, and they do not have any role to play in understanding of criticism, but they are related with the history of test, and they usually reflect the social and psychological compulsions which prompted their utterances. Then he's clarifying that what means by value judgment, and then he said that how these values are not based on literary experience but based on sentiments derived from religious and political prejudice. And then sentimental judgments are usually based either on non-existent categories or antitheses, or on a visceral reaction to the writer's personality. What we consider as a criticism, these things, Fry is having a very interesting objections for that. We should not call it as a criticism. He's saying that the literary chit chats, which makes the reputation of poets either to boom or crash, what we usually call it in the financial sector, that there is a boom in stock market and crash in stock market. If there is a boom in stock market, then people will get rich, and if there is crash in stock market, people will lose the money, they will become poor. In the same fashion, if you apply this financial aspect to literature, you will find out this literary chit chat, what is happening around us. These literary chit chats either give boom or crash in literary stock market. It literally, in an imaginary stock exchange, he's saying it is called as this this is called a pseudo criticism. This whole thing, when you have a discussion, literary chit chat, this will make the poet's impression or poet's popularity to rise or to fall down in imaginary stock exchange, and that is called a pseudo criticism. This is literary chit chat. Any wealthy investor, Mr. Elliot, he gives an example. After dumping Milton on the market, is buying him once again. This is what usually happen in the stock market. The investor try to put some company into loss by making its shares uh, a bit even I don't have any big or much knowledge about share market, but what we read and what we heard about it, that some investor will take shares of certain companies, and if you stop selling that share, the rate of that share will increase, and once the rate will increase, he will sold out all the shares and make it profit. So he's dumping certain company or booming certain companies in the hands of the investor. So critics right now today working as an investor, dumping any literary writer, and once again, once you got it certain less value, you are trying to bring him back once again. Or Dunn has probably reached his peak and will begin to taper off. Or Tennyson maybe in for a slight flutter, but Shelley stocks are still bearish. You can he's applying all the terms which are used in market. And when he's applying the terms which are used in market, he's trying to make it out that we have make it as a sort of market. And everything is dependent upon uh, the investor, the critique. After knowing the response of the critic, we used to move there and find out either if he's giving an example of financial market sector to literature and literary criticism. This is very simple for us to understand how someone can make someone hit. Look out, a very common trend that we used to find out in our day-to-day life. If you want to make a film hit, you what you used to do, you used to bring out critics talking about that film, having a debate and discussion about the film in media and in everywhere. You are having debate and discussions about that film, passing on certain casual judgments, saying that this is wrong, this is right, this is correct, this is freedom of expression. And you start to hear all those things, and the curiosity rises, and you said, yes, at least let us move and watch once what is happening there. Or you say, no, no, it is bad. Why to watch it? Because so many people are saying so many things. So it is the critic who decides whether it is to be taken at high position or drop it. This is how this is going on to him. And this is not adding into any knowledge, area of knowledge. This is not adding anything constructive in the area of knowledge. And that's why Fry says that this is pseudo criticism. Yeah, we have very interesting issue. We have seen it a couple of years back about Padmavat, the film Padmavati or Padmavat, and then how the things happen, whether it becomes hit or it becomes flop, that you know it very well. Without talking on the merits and demerits of making of that particular film, or without knowing what the writer has written into that particular text, we started to comment that we have to ban this text because this text has hurted the sentiments. These critics start talking of, and all of a sudden we said this is bad, this is bad book, need not to read, dump it, and the books are kept in a corner. Without understanding the literal meaning that is part of that particular work, we are discussing, we are developing our understanding based on the literary chit chat. And that's why Fry is saying that this literary chit chat, this sort of thing, cannot be part of a systematic study. How this can be a part of systematic study? For a systematic study, this can only progress if you want a systematic study can progress further, making you to understand the things based on the literal meaning of it. Whatever is making you to deviate from that particular thing, or giving you or making you to give reaction to this thing, Fry says these all these things are merely a leisure class conversations. And our understanding of literature is based on this leisure class conversation. We have not at all developed the sense of criticism, what exactly it means by, and that's why we live on, we survive, I can say, on pseudo criticism. These are the mere leisure class conversation. That is what Fry is putting his objections over the contemporary criticism of label right now. What his next step? Fry is trying to develop the serious group of critics, and what the serious group of critics used to say, that how the criticism should be and how it would gradually develop, how it can become systematic uh, study and systematic progress. All those things we will discuss it in tomorrow's lecture.